Good day, fellow deal makers. Welcome to the Deal Scout. This show is about deals and deal makers, the story behind deal makers. I want you guys to learn about them so we can know, like, trust, and then do a deal together. That's the mission of the show: is put people together, do deals. And on today's show, we're going to talk about investing and what the future could look like. So, Dennis, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Josh.
Yeah, well, it's good to have you. All right, so tell us a little bit about who you are and what are you focused on.
Okay, so I'm the founder of SNP Financial Advisors. I've worked in the investment industry for 28 years. I started out as a financial advisor. I moved into management where I eventually became an executive for a Wall Street-based investment company. They sold that company in 2018, so that gave me an opportunity to open up my own company, which is S&P Financial Advisors. And when I was doing this, it was really funny. I got a call from my brother, and he asked me this question. He's like, and this was kind of in the middle of the pandemic and COVID going on. He's like, "What's going on in the world today?" And I was like, he's like, "It just feels like something's weird is going on." So I went on this search for what is going on in the world today. And that's kind of what led me into really like diving full head into how technology is changing our world.
Yeah.
So that's the topic we're talking about today.
Listen, if you could figure out what's going on in the world today, like to answer your brother's question, I have no freaking clue, brother. Right? So
It's very confusing right now.
it really is, but there's some interesting opportunities that you're seeing that we're going to talk about on today's show, right? So, and when the world is being a little crazy, disruptive, there's technologies and things that you're seeing from an investor mindset, and you want to talk about it on today's show. So, why don't you kind of start painting the picture of first, what are you seeing?
So what I'm seeing, and other people are seeing this as well. That's where a lot of my research has come from. But what I'm seeing is we are at the beginning stages of a major, I believe, a major disruption in a lot of our foundational industries within our economy. And so this is being spurred on by the creation or technological development of electric cars, blockchain, and the technologies that come along with that, artificial intelligence, which is just really going to speed up our world, and then renewable energy and the price of electricity coming down over or in the future. And so we have some major disruptions that are happening. And the last time I could think of when this would have happened in our world, you'd have to go back to the 19th century. So you go back to like, 1870, going into 1900, and you had the automobile coming out. You had like the end of the whaling industry and the start of the oil industry. And so you kind of saw a major shift in how our economy was running. And I believe we're about ready to see that again.
All right. So exciting, a little nervous, right? I'm excited about the future. I'm also a little nervous. I'm typically an optimist. So kind of paint the picture. Let's look at these categories that you shared with me: electric cars, blockchain, renewable energy, AI. Those are the ones that you kind of shared with me. Let's start with electric cars. All right. So how the hell will it disrupt the industry and how will it affect people like me, right? I got a big diesel truck. I drive to work. I pull a camper, take my family, most of the time I walk to my office. So how's an electric car going to affect me and my kids?
Yeah, so and I think this is a lot. This is hard to kind of wrap your mind around. And before I really started getting into this, I just thought an electric car was like a regular gas powered car. It was just electric. But when you really start getting into how electric cars could disrupt our world, it's a very fascinating story. So you first off, you got to look at the difference between an electric car and a gas powered car. An electric car has like way less parts than a gas powered car. And so, how long an electric car, the life of an electric car is probably much longer than a gas powered car. We're looking like 500,000 to a million miles that these cars could go. The other big difference is you're not putting gasoline in it. And so there's a huge cost savings that could come about. And I think a lot of people are starting to see that as you see the price of oil go up because of the fear of inflation and not just the fear of inflation, but inflation happening. People that are driving Teslas right now or an electric car aren't feeling the effects of that energy bill every year. Where I think you'll really, this is where the real tipping point I think could happen is when you see driverless cars, the technology for driverless cars really become mainstream, solidified, approved by the government, and everybody feels comfortable with it. And I think this is sooner than what most people are thinking that this could happen. And so when that happens, all of a sudden you're looking at the average US family's bill to go to travel every year could drop by about six to $8,000 a year in expenses. And why this would be is you may not need to own a car anymore. So when driverless cars are available, you have things like an Uber type of service, and these cars could come and pick you up. And I think Tesla's got the price per mile at about 18 cents a mile that they could take you in a driverless car. Well, right now it costs about 75 cents a mile for us to drive somewhere. So the pure economics of it is it's just going to be a lot cheaper to ride around in an electric car versus your own gas powered car.
Mm.
And then the impact of that, when that starts happening, the impact of that is it's like a domino effect on a lot of different economic industries and companies out there that are kind of around our current and internal combustion engine car.
Yeah. So there's a whole ecosystem that surrounds automobiles, right? The people who are selling, the people who maintain new cars,
Yeah.
parts, right? So, in a past conversation, you mentioned like in a gas powered vehicle versus the maintenance on first, the future of electric vehicles. Explain to us and how that impacts our local mechanics or auto parts stores.
Yeah, so this is, and this is where the creative destruction comes in. And, it's a great story. Everybody that isn't involved in the automobile industry is like, great, I get to save $8,000 a year potentially in my expenses.
Mhm.
But the people that are around internal combustion engines, so we think about it, well, the car manufacturers, an electric car is a much different car than a gas powered car. It's a piece of technology. It's kind of like the difference between an iPhone and your old landline telephones. Um, and so it's a different piece of technology completely. So I think you're going to see traditional auto manufacturers have a very difficult time make this transition to electric, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The other impact of this is anybody that drives for a living. So Uber drivers, semi-truck drivers, delivery people, anybody that's driving could feel the impact of this in the future as this starts to transition. You look at car mechanics. Electric car just isn't going to break down as much, and if people aren't owning them, you don't necessarily need a mechanic per se. So mechanics could feel the impact of this. Car insurance companies.
Mm.
A lot of Tesla has their own car insurance. It's going to be much cheaper over time, just because cars will be safer. And so that's a big impact as well. So you start looking at all of the oil. Oil is the biggest one. You start looking at people not filling their cars up with oil every day or every week. That's a huge impact on a major foundational part of our economy. So you start looking at the residual impact of this technology and how it could change our world in I think, a beautiful way, but also it's going to be painful to get there.
Right. Like what happens to all the schools, the technical schools that are teaching, combustion engines and such like that, or, professional drivers, Uber drivers or truck drivers, right? So
Yeah.
as self-driving cars go, what happens to the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people? I don't even know. I didn't do any research on this, but like what happens to their job? Now, obviously we know that in a revolution, technology revolution or disruption, new opportunities created, but there's a transition and a transition period. So you kind of painted a picture for electric cars. So, as an investor, what are you considering as investing in as in that category, right? So, Tesla potentially, like what other categories are you looking at that maybe other people aren't?
So when you look at, and this is the hard part with investing, because to get the companies that are going to create the future, it can be very difficult. Like to pick the Apple out that's going to just have that's going to own the iPhone market can be very difficult to do. Although I think Tesla's firmly in the driver's seat here on the electric car market. It's a company I just feel really, the world could be their oyster, really, potentially. And so, Tesla, I think, is a big one, but there's a new electric car company that came out called Lucid. They got the fast or the longest driving car, so you could go the furthest on one charge, and very creative engineering in their car. And you saw a lot of new electric cars come out, and you've been seeing traditional auto manufacturers trying to make the turn as well. So, but I think from an investment standpoint, I think something like a Tesla, maybe a Lucid. Um, but the other way I look at this is how do you avoid the disruption? And I think it's really easy to identify which industries could be disrupted through this. And so I've kind of taken two strategies. One, if we're going to invest in the disruption, we got to diversify. We got to be spread out between a lot of different companies that could make their sector of the market work. The other way to do this is to avoid the disruption. And so there's back in 2018, in the financial services world, it became available for people to buy a partial share in a stock.
Yep.
So like Tesla is around $1,000 a share right now. Well, if somebody doesn't have $1,000, they can't buy any stock in Tesla. Well, that changed when you could buy a partial share. So you could buy up to 1/1000th, I think, or 1/10,000th of a share, something like that. So with a small amount of money, you could buy stock in one company, even though you can't buy a full share. So what this allowed me to do is really take something like the S&P 500 index, and you can recreate the S&P 500 index in a portfolio, but take out all of the companies that you feel will be disrupted from it. So I created a portfolio like that. I call it the S&P 250. I took the 500 largest
Cut it in
companies
half.
in the United States, and I took out all the oil companies, all the traditional car manufacturers, all the banking, all the electric, all the utilities, all the car insurance, all the industries that I felt could be disrupted over the next 10 years. And so you're left with a handful of companies that, about 250 companies that I feel, I don't see them being disrupted in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you have a multi-approach strategy to this. You've got to have traditional investments that will just probably ride through this, but you're also going to try and invest in the new innovative companies. That's a much more challenging task.
Yeah. You know what drives me nuts? I just bought a brand new MacBook Pro, and on the side, I went to go plug in my microphones, and there's only two USB-C ports. So no USB, the regular ones that all my mics run off of, or my web camera and all this stuff. So I had to go buy an adapter, and I tried three freaking different adapters so I can use my web camera, microphone, and I'm going to circle around and how this all makes sense. So in the opportunity of what's going on in electric vehicles, there's going to be plugs, adapters. You go to a different city, you might need to have this universal plug or this or that. We don't want standardization from, maybe the government, but we want opportunity to create other, you know, appliances, or, maybe a self-charging battery or solar charging battery or something like that. So there's going to be opportunity even though disruption happens, and there's going to be 15 different plugs that you have to keep on your keychain when going to different states or whatever. So, and Apple did a great job at screwing my life up with all these different plugs, trying to figure out how to do all this, right?
And then you get used to one, and then they change it,
And
right?
they
Yeah.
freaking change it on me. So brilliant. It's brilliant because I will buy whatever new plug I have to use all this other crap. So electric vehicles, there's still opportunity to, partial investments in one share, right? Like a percentage of a share. And then taking a look at, okay, here's the 250, the Dennis, how do you pronounce your last name?
Snoozy.
I'm going to call it the Snoozy 250, right? So your list of 250 companies that maybe won't be affected as much by the electric vehicle disruption. So you could, you know, one thing we could do is maybe avoid the destruction that we think might be happening on the horizon. Let's take a look at, so blockchain's a huge thing. Let's skip that for now. Let's talk about AI. How can AI disrupt? I mean, we've seen the movie Terminator, so like, one day Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to come back from being governor and be a Terminator. But how else could AI disrupt, and what should we look for as investors?
Well, I think with artificial intelligence is it's going to be kind of like everywhere. Everything that we're going to be doing is going to be AI is going to make it efficient, and that's how you got to think of a artificial intelligence. I think from an economic standpoint, it's going to make companies more efficient. It's going to take tasks that we normally do, like take electric cars. Without artificial intelligence, you don't have a driverless car. I mean, this is not going to happen. So you start looking at the impact of this, and there's all kinds of creative uses of artificial intelligence right now to make life more efficient. Like I read a article about, I think it was the city of Miami, and they're putting these sensors in the garbage cans, the big dumpsters.
Mm-hmm.
And so what this allows the city of Miami to do is they don't necessarily have to go pick up every dumpster every week. They will know which dumpsters need to be picked up by how full they are. So things that we're just kind of doing blanketly, we're going to have more pinpointed action or results or things that we need to do to take care of whatever problem it is that AI is helping us solve. So I think artificial intelligence, a huge world. I just know it's going to make everybody more efficient, every company more efficient, and things that we're used to just doing on a that we would maybe do on a daily basis or have to do like every so often, we're going to know exactly when we need to do that. There's a number of companies that have come out that are creating sensors, and you're going to start seeing these sensors all over the place,
Yeah.
and they're going to feed information back to computer systems about how systems are running and how efficient they're running and what problems they're having, and when we need to step in as people and solve the problem. And so I think that's where artificial intelligence is just going to be so powerful, is it's going to save us a lot of time on doing things that aren't really that productive.
Oh my gosh. You know what I imagine? So my job as a podcast host is to, hear things, and then all the crazy questions that pop into my head, I'm supposed to ask them, right? So that's
Right.
the benefit of being a podcast host, right? Do you think that's going to make us absolutely stupid, where everything is completely optimized and efficient, where we're just like showing up and it's like, you need to eat 3 pounds of broccoli today, and it just shoves it in your mouth, and it like eliminates our critical thinking thing, where we just look to our phone and say, what should I do today? Well, based on your efficiency record, you need to do this or that. And you're like, okay, I guess I'll do that, Siri. Siri tells me what to do, right? Is that scary?
I think when you, and this is scary, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm a little afraid of this. Like, I was born in 1970. I've seen the world change tremendously. And I'm sitting here looking at this going like, man, do I want to be part of that world? Like,
Right.
a little bit of you. And I think everybody probably feels that way. There's like a little resistance. I feel like everybody kind of knows there's a lot of change coming, but we're kind of like, how do we hide for it? Let's just kind of put it out of sight, out of mind,
Yeah.
because we don't really know how we're going to be in this new world. And I think, and this is going beyond the scope of, like what is a good investment or not, but I kind of feel like we as people we're going to have a lot more time on our hands, and we're going to have to probably change. We're going to have to adapt to the new technology that is there. But this is something we've gone through before. Like, you look at what life was like in the 1900s or in the 1800s. Like, it was a very tough life. Like, you got up and you worked from sun up to sundown, hard manual labor. Well, when mechanization came in, it just made our lives easier. So we weren't working 12 hours a day, it went down to 8 hours a day. I think
With
you're
that,
going to kind of see that type of stuff. You're going to see less stuff to do and more time for us to sit around and think. And so we're going to have to evolve from all of this, is how I look at it.
yeah. So I love this conversation. So with that example, right? But that affected us where it made our life maybe easier, but now we also got a lot fatter. Cancer went through the roof, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, right? Diabetes wasn't as crazy as it was in the 1800s or 1900s when everybody had to work and eat non-processed food. So, man, I see how technology can also, can be a major blessing and huge opportunity, but it could also be, as humans, if we have more time on our hand, are we going to get ourselves into more nonsense, right?
And I think we got this is I don't know. We're gonna find out.
We're gonna
We're
find
gonna
out.
find out.
Yeah.
And I don't know, this is kind of an interesting time to be alive, I think. I'm like really excited for the future because I feel like I have a front row seat. I kind of understand what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of excited to see how this all turns out. Like we're gonna see a lot, I believe, over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And our lives are gonna change tremendously over the next 10 years.
You see, this is the difference between investor and non-investor. The non-investor will hold back and withhold, and they'll miss opportunity. The investor is going scary, little exciting though too. Where do I think the best opportunity is? And I think it's the investor who's looking at the world a little different and going, wow, I'm like front row seats with a box, pack of popcorn, eating, watching this unfold before my very eyes. I thought this would be 100 years from now, but it's like accelerating how technology's going and how disruption overnight. I grew up. I've said this on another show. I grew up, Josh. Whatever you do not get into a stranger's car. Now there's Uber. Whatever you do not go into a stranger's house. Airbnb, right? Whatever you do, don't let someone take your dog. And they have like apps that you could click and someone will come pick up your dog, a stranger, right? It's like all the advice my mom gave me growing up is now wrong.
It's all wrong, right? I mean,
So wrong.
we're gonna see that, and I think, and I was reading it. I have three daughters. So my youngest daughter is 8 years old,
Yeah.
and I was reading this article about, what is her life gonna be like, and because you kind of start, I'm thinking about my, how are adults gonna go through this, but you think about how kids are gonna go through this,
Mm-hmm.
and this article I was reading was saying the job that she's gonna have hasn't even been created yet. it, and I think that's what we're going to kind of see. It's hard to see how the world is going to change. Things are going to be easier and cheaper, like transportation will be easier and cheaper. But what new will be added onto that we're going to want to do as humans, or what new ideas do we come up with to provide better products or services to people in light of this new technology? And I think that's the part that's going to be really interesting, because I, I I'm a firm believer in people. Like, we are very resilient. We've been through a lot of stuff in our history. We're phenomenal at adapting. We're very creative people when we think about it. So there's a lot of fear that goes into this, but I'm kind of optimistic because I believe that the human race will figure this all out and will prosper from it. And so that's kind of the viewpoint I have. But
Yeah.
you got to hang back. The rules that we live by today, I think you're going to have to start throwing some of them out.
Yeah. But all right, so this is optimism as an investor is good, but as an investor, you also have to go. All right, there also has to be a critical pessimist side, or you'll bet all your money on the next pet rock or the next TikTok trend or whatever, and then you're like, I lost all my money, right? So as a financial advisor, how do you how do you do it, right? So we don't give any financial advice here, right? So then you have to everyone here has to sign a disclosure and all disclaimers and all that. But like, how do you manage the optimism versus, all right, let's hedge our bets here in this? How do you do this with your own personal money?
Well, I think, the key to this is, you said it perfectly, hedge your bets. Like, don't you don't go to you don't get you stay away from gambling as much as possible, and the way to do that is through diversification. So you always have, your safe money. You make sure there's some safe money there, because we've seen some volatility, and I think we're going to see a lot more volatility in the investment markets in the coming, probably this next year and maybe even the year beyond. Very interesting time from an economic standpoint, I believe. So you just got to hedge your bets. You got to have some very conservative. I like my strategy of avoid disruption, because you can kind of invest more in the general type of economy types of stocks, but you're avoiding the disruption. And then I think you've got to have a strategy to invest in some of this disrupted world that's coming. And those stocks right now have been beaten up pretty heavily this past year. When the S&P 500 was going up so much, you look at like ARC portfolios, which is investing in innovation, they're off 50% from their high right now. And so that's a pretty substantial fluctuation down. But to me, the reason they're doing that is because there's this fear of interest rates really going up. And that's really skewing the whole picture of what's happening in a technological world right now.
Right.
Is we're dealing with economic factors that are just really kind of confusing what's happening from a technological standpoint and how the world's going to change.
Yeah.
So
So got three daughters, right? I've got three kids. I got girl, boy, girl, 842. Um, the jobs that I was as I was going through school and thinking about, hey, when I grow up, I want to be this, which I'm still trying to figure that piece of growing up. But like the jobs that our kids will have don't even exist yet, right? Like my 2 year old, architecture, engineering, hammer swinging, right? Like those kind of jobs might not exist. So, how are you raising your kids to prepare for that? How do you prepare your kids for that?
wow, this is a deep conversation, but I think as a parent, you got to kind of think about it. Like, I think, we love our kids. We want to prepare them the right way for the world. But, I think what we're going to need to be as people, I think technology, so anything that they could do from a like engineering or mathematics or physics, they could be part of creating this new world that's coming, and that there's going to be a lot of jobs there in a big way. I think the other thing that you're going to need to be is very creative. We're going to have a lot more free time on our hands.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be very creative, innovative things that happen in the future. And so our kids are either going to be technologically developing the world, I believe, or they're going to be very creatively figuring out ways to use this new technology to help people out. I also believe you're going to have more of a world economy. I believe you're going to see it's going to be easier to do business in other countries from here in America. And with technology and like Zoom and the metaverse, which could be coming out, which is a whole different topic sometime that we could talk about, but it's going to be easier than ever to do business overseas, virtually, and to also pay for it, whatever services or goods are being transported and transport it. All of that's going to be a lot easier, in the future world.
Yeah.
So, how do we prepare our kids? It's like, be honest, be creative, do what you're interested in, learn how to learn. Like, I think they just need to know how to learn really well. And I think some of us as parents, we got to kind of like chill on some of our rules a little bit. Like, so, kind of like what your mom said, don't ever get in car with strangers. Well, now you're getting in a car with stranger. Like, I think there's like the world's going to change very much. So getting in these really solid rules of things that would keep us safe today, we got to kind of think about how those might change in the future.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Learning
it's
how to
a
learn. I think you're right on. Learn how to learn, learn how to gain wisdom. And then I think because there's some things that I'd love your thoughts on this. I think that there are some things that you cannot automate. There are things that you cannot outsource. There's some things that technology I think, cannot fulfill a gap. So human connection. I think that there'll be things for emotional, how to deal with emotions, right? So now we have more free time. So we're lacking purpose and we're walking around like, like, oh, I don't have to show up to work today? Oh, okay, well, what do I do with my life, right? So I think counselors, guidance, creatives will be the ones in the future who are the billionaires, right? It's the
Yeah.
person who can paint. They're like, wow, how do you know how to paint? You know,
Yeah.
what are you doing? You know how to make a song, right? So I think the creatives will rule the future.
Well, and that is, I mean, that's happening right now. I mean, like art and music, the blockchain, we haven't talked much about that,
NFTs and yeah,
but like talk about the ease of being able to like come up with something very creative, either artwork or music or whatever, and being able to sell that will be easier than ever in the future as blockchain starts developing and the ease of communicating around the world. So yeah, I think it could be very, very interesting. But I think I agree, agree. You got to learn how to learn. They're going to have to know how to learn.
yeah.
It's going to be huge.
I think so. I think so. So as an investor, right, you're just seeing all the stuff and you're kind of excited about what's going on, a little nervous, a little excited, and then you're like, but if I'm going to do this, I'm going to remove these things that I think the industry will be disrupted. So you're just moving those. There's not even a part of my focus. I'm not investing in those because I think they're going to be massively disrupted. So you're starting to look through this eyes of electric cars, blockchain, renewable energy, and AI. Let's talk about renewable energy and how that's going to impact. And then I want to uh, actually pause. You said you were part of you were in Wall Street, you became an executive. They had an exit event 2018, and that's when you kind of went off and started your own. Why did you choose to get back into the game of uh, wealth advisory and managing money versus painting or, being a professional bull rider or something? Why'd you choose to get back in that game? you know?
Well, it's what I've done it's what I've done my whole career. It's like, it's something I've worked probably 50 plus hours every single week since I was 23 almost, except for the weeks I've been on vacation doing this in one form or another. I also felt like I had a really interesting perspective because I'm a financial advisor, but I also understand kind of the operations of a broker dealer. Being in those executive meetings and just understanding how a broker dealer operates in our world. There's a lot of efficiencies that we can do right now when you're creating up a new company that doesn't have all the infrastructure. And so I think, I'm taking advantage of what technology has given us. Like, you could create a company like this fairly quickly and fast and really effective without the massive infrastructure of a broker dealer. And that's because of technology today. So I was looking to use that. And I feel like this is a powerful, I think people need this. You have ARC and you have Kathy Woods out there talking about this message, and she's providing the investments. But I really feel like people need some guidance at this point in time. And if they don't realize it now, there's going to come a time in the next 10 years where they're going to wake up and go like, wow, this is happening. Like, this, I am being affected by this. And they're going to want a place to reach out to that kind of understands what's going on. And so that's my belief. And if you can help people with their money, and as that role of a financial advisor expands, helping them with more and more problems, I just feel like it's a natural fit for what I wanted to do for the rest of my working career. So.
Very cool. So, renewable energy. All right, talk to us a little bit about what are you seeing?
So you look at solar, and solar's been around for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's like, but in the last 10 years, what's really making solar work is the electric car world. And that's the battery storage part of it. So your ability to put the cost of creating solar has dropped by 70% over the past decade. It's a huge cost savings. And it's projected that over the next decade, that's going to keep going down. by 70%. So you have the cost of solar going down, and then you have the technology of battery storage. So a battery storing that extra power that you're creating and being able to store it for longer and more effectively. So as you see the technology of battery storage coming up and the cost of that come down, it's a recipe for the cost of electricity to really start dropping pretty significantly over the coming decade. And this is, I think, more your housing, the housing world. It's a little bit more challenging when you get to commercial electricity and things of that nature. But from just us and how we operate our house, the cost to have solar running your house and the electricity in your house and the ability to store it and the price of that, I think is just going to be like an obvious, like, why wouldn't I do that? Why do I have to pay the electric company to do this? And so I think you're just going to naturally see the effects of the cost structure, and what's cheaper for me to get what I need as a consumer is just going to take us to renewable energy over time.
So things to look for in that world, right? Things to maybe avoid. Maybe the industry of oil and gas, maybe not so much, but maybe the world of battery research, cables, um, the stuff that it's made of, the aluminum. What I don't even know what it is, but the glasses and all those kind of things. So those are things to maybe explore, pay attention to, right? What about blockchain? So I left that one for last. Blockchain. Holy moly! I don't even know if I myself fully understands what blockchain is and how it could disrupt. So kind of paint a picture for what on the point that you understand. Paint a picture for us.
So, and I like blockchain is one of those things that there's some very creative people out there right now that I think have a vision of how blockchain can replace so many different things that we do in our life. When we think of blockchain right now, we think of cryptocurrency. But let me kind of just step back and explain blockchain and what it does.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a way to record let's use a transaction. So let's say, I bank at Bank of America, and let's say you bank at Wells Fargo, and I write you a check for $100, and
Thank
you
you.
go and you deposit it, right?
Right.
So what happens is it takes it out of my account, credits my account, and debits your account at Wells Fargo. So there's a credit and a debit that happens. What blockchain is, and that's done on from Bank of America to Wells Fargo, it's a debit credit. So you have the banks acting as the debit and credit part of the accounting. What blockchain is you take the banks out of, and this is done on the bank's mainframes. So one of the risks you look at is, I mean, and we're seeing it with all of our passwords and all these password
Yeah.
storage things, and you got to update your password all the time. Um, you got to keep the mainframe protected, because if somebody gets into a hacker gets into one of those bank mainframes and just, you know, goes to town, the bank's very much in jeopardy there. So what blockchain does is it really protects these transactions from ever being manipulated in any way. So it creates almost absolute trust in our financial system when it would fully be in place. And how it does that is, instead of it just being a bank being the debit and the credit part of it, there's a ledger in the cloud, essentially, is how you want to think of it. And it's on a series of networks of computers around the world that are recording these debits and credits. So if I were to, instead of writing you a check and doing it through the bank, what I could do is I could just transfer $100 of a cryptocurrency, let's say the US dollar cryptocurrency even, to you. It happens almost instantaneously. The debit it comes out of my account, or the debit comes, or credit comes out of my account, debits into your account. And that's recorded on about, hundreds or thousands of ledgers around the world. So the only way you could corrupt that is you'd have to go into every one of those ledgers and change it simultaneously. The other level of protection is there's a piece of code underneath that transaction that almost locks it into place. It creates this chain, and that's how they call it, like blockchain. is it locks that transaction into place where you would need to like hack in and change this code in all of the ledgers and then change all of the ledgers at the same time. So it's almost impossible to um, hack a blockchain type of transaction. And so this is just going to give extreme trust to every type of financial transaction that we do. It could give extreme, like verifying our identity, for example, like a driver's license right now. I mean, when, I never had a fake ID, but a lot of kids I knew when I was in college had fake IDs. And that was pretty easy to replicate. Well, impossible to replicate an ID and verify you when something's set up on the blockchain. So you start looking at the trustworthiness of what we're doing and how that could come across in the blockchain. Is I think how it could impact the world in a tremendous way.
I also so this disrupts the banking industry, right? So then you don't have someone sitting there and how would you like your change today, Dennis? It's just that kind of stuff can happen just between you and I. And also, what about attorneys, title companies, the world of real estate transactions, uh, car. I hope to God it disrupts the DMV, right? Where I buy a new Tesla or something like that, and I don't have to stand in line for 18 hours to get this thing registered. It could be done. That transaction could be done and registered immediately, right?
Right.
Hmm.
And you're touching on a lot of the key areas there. I mean, they're all going to change. I don't know if their professions are all going to be disrupted, but what they're doing and how they do it is definitely going to be involved with the blockchain. I believe over the coming years, because in all of these technologies, everybody's like, oh, I don't think that's going to happen, or it's going to take forever. Well, like, listen, if I have a choice of walking to the grocery store or driving to the grocery store, what do most people choose to do? Let's say the grocery store is 2 miles away.
Oh, drive.
Most drive, fly.
Actually, get the delivery, right? You just deliver.
Like we want things to be easy, as easy on us and as fast on us as possible. So once we understand that something's faster and easier, cheaper, safer, we all tend to gravitate towards it.
Yeah.
So this isn't like somebody's going to wake up one day and go, oh, I'm going to start using blockchain over regular money because I want to. It's naturally going to happen because it's just going to be way more competitive or better in some way.
Yeah. So let me do this. I love the categories that you've explained and kind of shared with what you see as an investor and the optimism and opportunity you see in the upcoming disruption. Let's do this. I got some cards with some questions on it. Uh, Tell me when to stop. We're going to ask you one of the questions.
Okay, there you go.
All right, here we go. We got a question. All right. What's something you could do 5 years ago that you can't do today? Okay, so what's something that you used to be able to do 5 years ago that you are not able to do today?
Me personally or in the
Yeah,
world?
no, you. Oh, that's a
Some I
great
use.
question. So you, and then maybe in the world too.
Wow, what's something I used to be able to do 5 years ago that I can't do today? Hmm.
I
I
used to be
don't
able
know
to
if there's.
drink beer. I can't drink beer anymore. My belly hurts.
Yeah, that's a big one. I really, yeah. Like recovering from a hangover of
Yeah,
some kind is like,
done.
that's like a 2 day affair now, where that used to be, I just get up and go, I guess. But,
Yeah.
stuff like that, I think as you get older, your body starts changing. Although I feel like I'm in pretty good health. So, I feel like I could still do a lot of the things I could 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's a hard one, but
It is. What
I
about
would
in the
say the
world?
hangover recovery is a big one.
Perfect. What about in the world? What's something that we used to be able to do 5 years ago that we can't do today? And then flip it. What's something we could do today that 5 years ago you're like, no way. There's no way you're going to be able to do that.
Um, I think 5 years ago we were more still in a paper world. Like paperwork was more physical paper, and so I think some of the things we used to do, like if we're gonna need to fix something, we would mail it to somebody. all that's kind of changed where it's now email or a digital signature, and you have to go back and get the digital signature and different things of that nature. Um, so I think that's one of the things, like how we fix things. Sometimes things used to be simple 5 years ago. Oh, let me just send this to this person to get them to sign it. Whereas today it's like, okay, I gotta scan this, I gotta upload it, I gotta email it to the person, I gotta get them to sign it. And so things become, something that used to be just simple. Let me put a stamp on it and mail it. Now we have a few more steps. And I think this is the hard part with technology too, is we all get frustrated with that stuff, right? Like, and that creates a little pullback with technology. It's like Zoom. Everybody got on Zoom when the COVID pandemic happened. And now I think everybody's like, oh, I'm tired of Zoom, but we're still all using it. And I think we're going to get used to using it. And then we're going to start using it more and more and more. And so, I think with efficiency and with things becoming easier, they also become more complicated. And that's the challenge that I think we face as people moving forward in the next decade to 20 years.
Very cool. Dennis, in this conversation, we talk about deals and deal makers. We talk about what a future deal could look like, and maybe what people want to just start exploring. For people in our audience, fellow deal makers, if they want to connect with you and chat with you about what you see as future deals and opportunities, what's a good place for people to connect with you?
So LinkedIn is a good place to just reach out and send me a message. It's Dennis Snoozy. I got a very unique last name, so I think it's pretty easy to find me. I also have on my website, which is www.snpfinancialadvisors.com. And then I have, just if somebody wants to talk to me for 15 minutes, like they just have a question or they found something interesting in this and they have like, I want to see what his thought is on this. I've just made it where anybody could go and schedule 15 minutes in my schedule with me. So you could go to www.schedulewithdennis and you could schedule 15 minutes with me, and I'd be happy to spend 15 minutes with anybody talking to them about any questions or thoughts that they have or want to explore on this topic. But I think it's an incredibly exciting topic. I love talking about it. I love thinking about it. And I feel like I've done a lot of research where I'm understanding it a lot. And so I love talking about this stuff. So anybody who wants to chat, jump on my schedule and I'll spend 15 minutes with you.
Very cool. Uh, is there a question that I probably should have asked you in this interview that I didn't? I tried to think of all the questions that I have. At least this is like baby step number one for our conversation, right? I'm sure there's other conversations and I'm sure there's other deeper questions. But in terms of this first, were there any questions that I completely should have asked?
No, I think I think you asked a lot of the really good questions. This is a topic like we could talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
Like if we sat down and had a drink for like we could sit and talk about it all day long because it's such an interesting story and so
We
many
need more
changes
than one
coming.
drink. I get thirsty, man. I'm a thirsty guy.
Yeah. So no, I think you did a great job at asking all the questions. It's just it's there's a lot you could talk about.
Very cool. So let's do this. Fellow deal makers in the audience, as always, reach out to our guests, say thank you, find a way to do a deal with them. If you guys are working on a deal, you in the audience, working on a deal, looking for a deal, or want to come on the show and talk about a deal, you could always head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, and maybe get you guys on the show next. Till then, talk to you all on the next episode about the next deal with the next deal maker. See ya.